The art of getting through to anyone. We live in a noisy world. Everyone is talking, but very few are listening. In boardrooms, relationships, and even friendships, miscommunication has become the silent destroyer of connection. You can have the best ideas, the right intentions, and still fail to get through to people. That's where Dr. Mark Goulston steps in. As a psychiatrist, business coach, and former FBI hostage negotiation trainer, he has spent decades learning one crucial truth. If you want to influence people, don't try to make them understand you. Make them feel understood. In his book, Just Listen, Goulston reveals the exact tools and mindsets that allow anyone, no matter how difficult, defensive, or emotionally closed off, to open up, trust you, and genuinely hear what you're saying. He calls this process getting through. It's the difference between people hearing your words versus feeling your message. The book takes us through neuroscience, emotional intelligence, and practical dialogue patterns that anyone can apply, whether you're managing a tough employee, dealing with a teenager, calming an angry customer, or simply trying to reconnect with someone you love. At its core, Just Listen teaches that every communication breakdown is an emotional one. If you can calm someone's emotions, you can open their mind. And when the mind opens, real influence begins. Chapter 1. The Secret to Getting Through to Anyone. Imagine walking into a conversation where the other person's mind is already made up. Their arms are crossed, their eyes avoid yours. Every word you say bounces off a wall of resistance. Mark Goulston calls this moment the brick wall of communication. It's the point where logic, persuasion, and even kindness stop working because the other person doesn't feel heard, understood, or safe. In this opening chapter, Goulston explains the first great secret of human connection. People don't listen when they're angry, afraid, or defensive. They listen when they feel understood. And that changes everything. The biggest mistake most of us make in communication is trying to be understood first, explaining, arguing, convincing. But the human brain doesn't work that way. Neuroscience tells us that before anyone can open their rational mind, their emotional brain must feel calm and safe. That's why Goulston's golden rule is, start by listening deeply, calmly, without judgment, until the other person feels felt. When that happens, something shifts. The walls begin to drop, the person's tone softens, their eyes engage, the fight or flight response in their brain relaxes, and they start to listen back. This isn't magic, it's biology. The amygdala hijack, why people shut down. Goulston introduces a powerful concept called the amygdala hijack. When someone feels threatened, emotionally, not just physically, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, takes over. Rational thinking shuts down. The person becomes defensive, reactive, and resistant. Trying to reason with someone in that state is like trying to teach algebra to a lion mid-roar. It won't work. So instead of fighting resistance, you neutralize it. You do this by creating a sense of psychological safety, making the other person feel that they are not being attacked, judged, or manipulated. You replace confrontation with curiosity. For example, instead of saying, "You're overreacting," you can say, "You seem really upset. Help me understand what's bothering you most right now." The second response lowers defenses instantly. It acknowledges emotion without judgment. It says, "You're safe to express yourself here." This emotional safety is the first step to what Goulston calls getting through. The power of listening to get through. Goulston explains that great communicators, whether therapists, negotiators, or leaders, share one extraordinary skill. They know how to make people feel heard. He calls it listening to the other person's eyes. That means paying attention not just to what they say, but to what they feel behind the words. When you truly listen, your attention becomes magnetic. People sense it. They feel drawn to open up because, deep down, everyone is desperate for one thing: to be understood. Here's a story Goulston shares from his own life. As a psychiatrist, he once met a patient who had tried to end her life multiple times. Other doctors had labeled her difficult or manipulative, but Goulston did something different. He didn't ask about her symptoms. He simply said, "You must be feeling hopeless to have done this so many times. Tell me what that's like." For the first time, she broke down crying. No one had ever seen her pain, only her behavior. That moment of empathy marked the beginning of her healing. That's the power of real listening. It changes lives, not through words, but through presence. From resistance to receptivity, the three-step path. Goulston outlines a three-step process to move people from resistance to receptivity. Diffuse the emotion. Calm the other person's emotional brain. Don't argue, don't advise, just listen. Use empathetic phrases like, "That sounds really tough," or "I can see why you'd feel that way," or "Tell me more about what's frustrating you most right now." When you validate feelings, you deactivate defensiveness. Establish connection. Once emotion subsides, the person starts to feel safer. They begin to trust you. This is where body language matters. Soft tone, relaxed posture, gentle nodding. Your presence communicates, "I'm not against you." Guide them toward clarity. Only after connection is built should you move to reason. Ask questions like, "What would make this situation feel better for you?" Or, "How can we move forward together?" At this stage, the brain is open to logic because emotion is calm. This sequence, emotion, connection, reason, mirrors how the brain actually processes communication. Most people do it backwards, starting with logic first, which triggers resistance instead of understanding. The mirror neuron effect, why empathy works. Goulston also explains the science of empathy through something called mirror neurons, specialized brain cells that reflect the emotions we perceive in others. When you genuinely empathize with someone, their brain mirrors your calmness. This is why speaking softly to an angry person often lowers their voice too. Your calm regulates their chaos. He calls this emotional co-regulation. It's not manipulation, it's emotional leadership. You lead people out of their reactive state by staying grounded yourself. To practice this, Goulston suggests a simple exercise. The next time someone vents or criticizes you, pause before you react. Take a breath and silently say to yourself, "They're not attacking me, they're expressing pain." Then respond with curiosity, not defensiveness. This single shift transforms arguments into understanding. Practical application: how to use this daily. Goulston has some practical tips from Chapter 1 that you can use in your everyday conversations. Start with listening, not talking. Before you respond, pause. Let the other person fully express themselves. Sometimes silence is the most powerful reply. Reflect back what you hear. Use phrases like, "What I'm hearing is," or "It sounds like you're saying." This shows that you're trying to understand, not defend. Use the "tell me more" technique. When someone shares something emotional or difficult, simply say, "Tell me more." It signals openness and builds instant trust. Stay grounded when others aren't. Goulston writes, "The calmer person controls the conversation. In moments of tension, your composure is your power." End with empathy. After every meaningful conversation, leave the person feeling understood, not instructed. Because when people feel heard, they naturally open their minds to you. A final reflection. The essence of Chapter 1 can be summed up in one sentence. The secret to getting through to anyone is to stop trying to get through and start trying to get in. Get into their world, their emotions, their experience. Because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. As Goulston writes, listening is not about hearing words, it's about hearing the person. This is where every great relationship begins, in business, leadership, or life itself.
Chapter 2: The Power of Getting Through, Turning Resistance into Connection. In this chapter, Mark Goulston reveals a truth that defines every human interaction. You can't move people until you first connect with them. Whether you are persuading a client, calming a friend, or leading a team, the real challenge isn't making them agree, it's getting them to open up. He calls this the first 10 seconds window. It's that brief moment in every conversation when a person decides whether to trust you or to shut down. Your tone, presence, and empathy in those seconds determine everything that follows. If you come across as defensive, pushy, or self-centered, the door closes. But if you show warmth, curiosity, and calm, the door to their mind and heart begins to open. This chapter is about learning to keep that door open, even with people who seem impossible to reach. Understanding resistance. The 3 levels of listening failure. Goulston identifies 3 major traps that cause communication breakdowns. Level 1. Listening with the intent to reply. Most people don't truly listen. They're waiting for their turn to speak. You can almost see the gears turning as they prepare their argument while the other person talks. The result? The speaker feels unheard and frustrated. Level 2. Listening to fix. This happens when you jump in with advice or solutions too quickly. Goulston says, when people share their pain, they don't want a mechanic, they want a witness. Trying to fix too soon sends the message that their feelings are inconvenient. Level 3. Listening with empathy and curiosity. This is the level where transformation happens. You're not waiting to respond or trying to solve. You're seeking to understand. You lean in, ask open-ended questions, and create a safe emotional space. The moment you shift from listening to respond to listening to connect, everything changes. The other person relaxes, the tone softens, their mind reopens. Goulston summarizes it beautifully. When you make people feel heard, they start to hear you. The cycle of resistance. Why people push back. To understand resistance, Goulston explains a psychological pattern called the pushback loop. It goes like this. You want to convince someone. They feel pressured. They resist or argue. You push harder. They shut down completely. The harder you push, the stronger the resistance grows. This is why most debates, at work, in relationships, even in politics, don't lead to understanding, but to division. So instead of pushing, Goulston teaches you to pull, through empathy, curiosity, and genuine concern. He gives an example from his time as a crisis psychiatrist. Once, he counseled a young man who refused to talk. Every attempt at reasoning failed. Finally, Goulston said quietly, "You seem like someone who's been disappointed a lot, maybe by people who were supposed to care. Am I close?" The man looked up and nodded. That single moment broke through months of silence. Why? Because instead of pushing for answers, Goulston named the emotion beneath the resistance. That's how you pull someone toward openness, by meeting them where they are emotionally, not intellectually. The mirror and label technique. One of Goulston's most powerful communication tools is the mirror and label technique. This is how you help someone feel truly seen. Here's how it works. Mirror. Reflect their words or emotions back to them. For example, if someone says, "I'm just tired of people not listening," you can respond, "You're tired of feeling ignored." This shows that you're not just hearing, you're absorbing. Label. Name the emotion you sense. You might say, "It sounds like you're frustrated and exhausted." When you accurately label what someone feels, their emotional brain relaxes. It's like saying, "You're safe, I get you." This disarms defensiveness because it bypasses logic and speaks directly to emotion. You're not arguing, you're validating. A great way to practice this is in everyday conflicts. Next time someone criticizes you, instead of defending, try this. "You sound disappointed. Tell me more about that." You'll be surprised how quickly anger turns into conversation. The unlock moment. When people finally open up. Goulston calls the moment someone truly opens up the unlock. It's the turning point when their emotional guard drops and authentic dialogue begins. This happens when three things align. They feel heard. You've mirrored and labeled their emotions effectively. They feel safe. You've shown calmness and respect, not judgment or ego. And they feel valued. You've made them believe their story and feelings matter. Once this happens, communication flows naturally. Instead of trying to get through, you're already in. The science behind the unlock. Neuroscience confirms what Goulston teaches. When people feel heard, their amygdala, the brain's threat detector, cools down. The prefrontal cortex, the reasoning center, lights up. This shift allows logical discussion to replace emotional defense. That's why great leaders, therapists, and negotiators focus first on emotional safety, because once emotions settle, the mind follows. In short, empathy is the gateway to influence. Real-world example, the angry customer. Goulston shares a corporate example to show how this applies outside therapy. One time, a manager faced an irate client threatening to cancel a major contract. The manager's instinct was to defend the company's side, but he remembered Goulston's principle, don't argue, listen. He said calmly, "You sound incredibly frustrated, and you've got every right to be." The client paused, stunned. For the first time, someone wasn't trying to talk him down. Instead, he was being understood. After venting for a few minutes, the client's tone softened, and they worked together to fix the issue. The contract was renewed. The lesson? You don't win people over by overpowering them. You win them by understanding what they feel and reflecting it back to them, respectfully and clearly. Self-awareness, managing your own defensiveness. Goulston emphasizes that mastering this skill also means managing your own reactions. When you feel attacked or misunderstood, your instinct is to fight back. But defensiveness kills connection. So he advises practicing what he calls emotional aikido. Just like the martial art that redirects an opponent's energy, you can redirect emotional attacks by staying centered and calm. Here's how it works. Breathe before you respond. Identify what emotion they might be expressing. Anger, fear, disappointment. Reflect it back instead of countering it. This neutralizes tension and gives you control of the emotional space. You stop being reactive and start being responsive. Practical techniques from Chapter 2. Here are key actionable techniques you can apply right now. Use "you seem" instead of "I think." Example, "You seem upset about how this turned out." This phrasing focuses on them, not on your interpretation. Pause before replying. That short silence gives space for emotion to settle and shows thoughtfulness. Ask instead of tell. Replace "you should calm down" with "what can we do to make this better?" Stay curious. Curiosity signals respect and keeps the other person talking, which is how you uncover what's really going on. End on validation. I really appreciate you sharing that. I can see how much it matters to you. The essence of the chapter. The second chapter of Just Listen teaches that getting through to anyone starts with emotional alignment, not intellectual agreement. You cannot connect with a closed mind, and a closed mind always belongs to a hurt heart. By mastering empathy, curiosity, and presence, you stop triggering people's defenses and start unlocking their openness. In Goulston's words, when you listen deeply enough to make people feel felt, they stop resisting and start relating. That's the key to every great conversation in leadership, love, and life. Chapter 3. The Magic Paradox. How to disarm people and turn adversaries into allies. In this chapter, Mark Goulston introduces one of the most powerful communication tools in the entire book, a tool he calls the Magic Paradox. It's the ability to disarm hostility
and turn even the most defensive, angry, or resistant person into someone who begins to trust, listen, and open up. At first glance, it sounds impossible. How can you get through to someone who doesn't want to listen, who's yelling, blaming, or shutting you out entirely? The answer, Goulston says, lies in doing the unexpected. What is the magic paradox? The magic paradox is based on one simple psychological truth. When you stop defending yourself, the other person stops attacking. When you meet aggression with calm acknowledgement instead of counterattack, it disrupts the emotional script that conflict usually follows. You create what psychologists call pattern interruption. Most people expect confrontation to escalate. They yell, you yell back, and tension grows. But when you respond unexpectedly, with calm acceptance, or even vulnerability, the emotional walls crack. It's a paradox because you gain influence by surrendering the need to win. For example, when someone says, "You never listen," instead of replying, "That's not true," you say, "You're right. I probably haven't been listening as well as I could." The other person pauses, surprised. The energy shifts from attack to understanding. This is emotional judo, using the opponent's force to bring balance, not conflict. Why the paradox works, the psychology behind it. To understand why the magic paradox is so powerful, Goulston explains how the brain reacts during conflict. When people feel criticized, their amygdala, the threat detector, fires up, flooding the body with adrenaline and cortisol. This triggers fight or flight, defensiveness, anger, or withdrawal. But when you respond with calm empathy and agreement, when you stop feeding their emotional fire, their brain no longer perceives danger. The amygdala quiets, and the prefrontal cortex, the logical brain, re-engages. In short, your calm disarms their chaos. That's why Goulston says, the fastest way to change someone's mind is to first change their emotional state. Real-world example, turning anger into understanding. Goulston shares a real-life story from his psychiatric practice. A mother brought in her teenage son, furious and silent, refusing to cooperate. He slumped in his chair, arms crossed, radiating hostility. Instead of lecturing or insisting he talk, Goulston said gently, "You probably think this is a waste of your time, that I'm just another adult who's going to tell you what to do." The boy looked up, startled. "Yeah, that's exactly what I think." Goulston smiled. "Then you're probably wondering how long you have to sit here before you can leave." The boy cracked a half smile. The tension began to dissolve. By acknowledging the boy's frustration, by agreeing instead of resisting, Goulston broke the wall of hostility. Within minutes, the boy started to open up about what was really bothering him. That's the magic paradox at work. Acceptance before argument.
Step by step, how to use the magic paradox. Goulston outlines a simple but powerful three-step process for applying the magic paradox in your own life. 1. Recognize the resistance. First, notice when someone is emotionally closed off, angry, dismissive, or defensive. Instead of reacting, observe their tone, posture, and words. Tell yourself, this isn't about me, it's about how they're feeling. 2. Name the unspoken truth. Next, acknowledge what the other person is likely feeling and say it out loud. For example, "You probably think I don't care about your opinion," or "You're frustrated because this keeps happening," or "You're tired of hearing excuses." This unexpected empathy short-circuits their defensiveness. They feel seen instead of judged. 3. Pause and let it sink in. Silence is powerful. After stating your observation, don't rush to fill the space. Let your words land. Often, the other person will soften or even agree, opening the door to real communication. This is not manipulation. It's emotional honesty. You're simply naming the elephant in the room, which releases the tension everyone feels but avoids addressing. When you admit fault, you gain power. One of the most counterintuitive lessons in this chapter is that admitting fault doesn't weaken your position, it strengthens it. Most people think power comes from defending themselves, but true power, Goulston explains, comes from emotional courage, the willingness to admit imperfection. For example, "You're right, I did drop the ball on that project, and I can see why you're upset." That statement instantly transforms the dynamic. The other person no longer sees you as an enemy. They see you as human. Now they're more likely to collaborate than to criticize. This kind of humility doesn't invite blame, it invites respect. The "what's really going on" question. Another technique Goulston introduces here is the "what's really going on" question. When someone reacts emotionally, snapping, withdrawing, or blaming, ask yourself silently, what's this person really trying to express? Often, anger hides fear. Criticism hides insecurity. Silence hides pain. Instead of focusing on the surface behavior, look beneath it. For instance, a boss yelling about a missed deadline might actually be scared about losing credibility. A friend giving you the cold shoulder might be feeling unappreciated. By identifying what's really happening emotionally, you can respond with compassion instead of defensiveness. From adversaries to allies, a corporate example. Goulston shares the story of a CEO who was constantly clashing with his CFO. Their meetings always ended in tension. The CEO wanted faster decisions. The CFO wanted more caution. Both were frustrated. Goulston coached the CEO to use the magic paradox. At the next meeting, instead of arguing, the CEO said, "You probably think I'm impulsive and don't think through the financial risks." The CFO froze, then laughed. "Yeah, that's exactly what I think." The CEO continued, "And I probably think you're too cautious and slow to act. The truth is, we both want what's best for the company. I just get impatient." That moment changed their relationship. The walls came down. They began to see each other as partners, not opponents. When you name the tension with honesty and empathy, you dissolve it. Goulston's practical takeaways from Chapter 3. Don't defend yourself, disarm. The instinct to defend yourself only fuels conflict. Instead, acknowledge the other person's truth, even if it's uncomfortable. Name the emotion. Use phrases like, "You sound really frustrated," or "You probably feel like this isn't fair." It's not about agreeing with their position, it's about validating their emotion. Use vulnerability as a tool. Saying, "I might be wrong," or "I didn't handle that well," earns more trust than defensiveness ever could. Pause after empathy. Silence gives people time to process. Don't rush to justify yourself. Let understanding breathe. Remember, agreement isn't surrender. You're not saying they're right about everything. You're simply saying you understand their feelings. That's what unlocks connection. Applying the magic paradox in everyday life. Try this in your next conflict. Instead of defending yourself, say something like, "You probably think I'm being stubborn right now, and maybe I am. I just really care about this." That kind of honesty doesn't make you weak, it makes you relatable. The other person feels seen, not fought against. You can use this with a frustrated spouse. "Probably think I never listen when you're upset." Or a tense colleague. "You might feel like I'm not valuing your input enough." Even a difficult client. "You probably feel like we've let you down." Every time you do this, you replace confrontation with connection. You turn enemies into allies. Closing reflection. The core message of Chapter 3 is simple but transformative. When you stop trying to be right, you start being effective. The magic paradox is not about surrendering power, it's about mastering emotional intelligence. It's the art of being so secure in yourself that you no longer need to prove anything. In that emotional stillness, you gain the ultimate power, the power to get through. Goulston concludes this chapter with a reminder. If you can make people feel safe enough to drop their armor, you can reach even the most unreachable.
Chapter 4. The Power of Listening, Turning Conversations into Connections. Mark Goulston calls listening the most underappreciated superpower in human communication. In a world where everyone is fighting to be heard, the person who truly listens holds the real influence. Chapter 4 of Just Listen is a masterclass in this art. Not passive listening, but deep, empathetic listening that makes people feel seen, valued, and understood. The core idea: listening is not about you. Goulston opens this chapter with a powerful reminder. Most people don't listen to understand, they listen to reply. But effective communication begins the moment you shift your attention entirely to the other person. When you stop thinking about what you'll say next and instead immerse yourself in what the other person is feeling, your conversations transform. He writes, when you make people feel heard, they relax, they open up, and they start to see you as someone on their side, not someone they need to defend against. This is not about agreeing with everything they say. It's about validating their emotions, a subtle but powerful difference. Validation builds trust, and trust opens the door to influence. The 3 levels of listening. To become a master communicator, Goulston explains that you must progress through 3 levels of listening. Level 1. Internal listening. Here, you're focused on yourself, your thoughts, your judgments, and your responses. It's when you're technically hearing someone, but mentally rehearsing your next line. For example, when your colleague is sharing a problem and you're thinking, how does this affect me? That's internal listening. It's the default mode for most people. Level 2. Focused listening. At this level, your attention shifts outward. You're genuinely curious about what the other person is saying, but still focused primarily on their words and logic, not yet their emotions. You're starting to connect, but the bond is still fragile. Level 3. Empathic listening. This is where magic happens. You're not just hearing words, you're tuning in to what's behind them. You're sensing tone, emotion, and body language. You're reading between the lines, catching what the person feels but can't say. At this level, you don't just listen, you feel with the other person. Goulston calls this state being fully present. When you reach it, people feel like you're listening with your soul, not just your ears. A story, the angry patient who just needed to be heard. Goulston shares a memorable story from his psychiatric practice. A patient stormed into his office, shouting and blaming everyone for his problems. Instead of interrupting or defending himself, Goulston simply said, "You sound really frustrated. Tell me more." That simple line, a mirror of empathy, completely diffused the man's anger. His shoulders relaxed, his voice softened, and within minutes, the storm was gone. For the first time, he felt heard. This story illustrates a crucial truth. When people are upset, they don't need solutions first. They need to be understood. Only after their emotional storm settles can they think clearly and accept guidance. The mirror neuron effect. Why listening changes behavior. Modern neuroscience backs this up. Goulston references the mirror neuron system, the brain's way of emotionally syncing with others. When you show empathy and calmness, the other person's brain subconsciously mirrors that state. Your composure literally calms their nervous system. Think about that for a second. Your calm presence can rewire someone's emotional reaction. Then listening isn't passive, it's a biological intervention that creates emotional alignment.
The technique, the feel, felt, found formula. One of Goulston's most practical tools for connecting with people emotionally is the feel, felt, found formula. When someone is frustrated, defensive, or resistant, you can respond like this. I understand how you feel. Others have felt the same way before, but what they found was that once they tried new idea or action, things got better. This short pattern does 3 powerful things. It validates their feelings. I understand how you feel. It normalizes their experience. Others have felt the same way before. And it guides them toward a solution without pressure. What they found was that this method helps bypass defensiveness. Instead of arguing, you gently align yourself with their emotions. And from that shared space, change becomes possible. How to listen like a therapist. Goulston offers several field-tested techniques to deepen your listening. Tell me more. This simple phrase invites people to keep talking. It signals curiosity and patience. Often, the most valuable insights come after the first few sentences, once people feel safe enough to reveal what's truly bothering them. I hear you saying you're feeling overlooked in the team. Is that right? Reflect their words back to them. It helps confirm understanding and shows genuine engagement. For example, I hear you saying you're feeling overlooked in the team. Is that right? What's most important to you about that? This question shifts the conversation from surface issues to core values. It transforms casual chats into meaningful exchanges. These tools work everywhere, in business, marriage, parenting, and friendship. They turn conversations into opportunities for emotional connection. The power, thank you. Listening through gratitude. An often overlooked aspect of listening is gratitude. Goulston introduces the idea of a power thank you, a thank you that goes beyond politeness. It recognizes the emotional effort behind someone's action. For instance, instead of saying, "Thanks for your help," try, "Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to help me. I know you had other priorities, and I really appreciate that you made the effort." This level of appreciation strengthens trust and motivates future cooperation. It's a form of listening that acknowledges not just what someone did, but why they did it. Practical applications. Using listening to get through to anyone. At work, when a colleague or employee is underperforming, resist the urge to criticize immediately. Instead, say, "You seem frustrated. What's been getting in your way lately?" Often, you'll discover unseen obstacles or emotions blocking their performance. At home, in family arguments, replace defensiveness with curiosity. When your partner says, "You never listen," reply, "I want to understand better. Can you tell me what I'm missing?" That small shift from reacting to inviting opens the door to reconciliation. In negotiations, great negotiators listen for emotion, not just logic. They ask, "What's your biggest concern here?" Once they address that, deals move forward with less resistance. Key lessons from Chapter 4. Listening is not waiting for your turn to speak. It's giving someone space to be human. People calm down when they feel understood, not when they're told they're wrong. Empathy is not agreement, it's acknowledgement. True influence begins when people sense that you get them. The feel, felt, found technique can transform resistance into cooperation. Final thoughts. Mark Goulston ends this chapter with a challenge. Before you try to get through to anyone, ask yourself, have I made them feel heard yet? Because until someone feels understood, they'll never truly listen to you. In the end, influence isn't about who talks best, it's about who listens deepest.
Chapter 5. The Persuasion Cycle, Moving People from Resistance to Connection. In Just Listen, Mark Goulston introduces one of his most powerful concepts, the persuasion cycle, a psychological roadmap showing how to guide people from resistance to agreement, from defensiveness to openness, and ultimately from no to yes. He argues that most communication fails not because our ideas are bad, but because we try to push people too quickly toward agreement. Instead, successful persuasion is about moving people emotionally through a predictable sequence of mental states, one step at a time. This chapter is the beating heart of the book, a masterclass in how to influence with empathy, not force. The core idea: people don't resist you. They resist feeling controlled. Goulston begins with a profound insight. People don't say no to your ideas. They say no to feeling pushed, ignored, or misunderstood. The moment people feel their autonomy threatened, their brain triggers what psychologists call the amygdala hijack, a primitive defense mechanism that shuts down reasoning and activates fight or flight mode. That's why logical arguments often fail. When emotions run high, logic is useless. To connect with someone, especially someone who disagrees, you must first disarm their emotional resistance before presenting your case. This is where Goulston's persuasion cycle comes in. The 6 stages of the persuasion cycle. According to Goulston, every person you want to influence, whether it's your spouse, your boss, or a skeptical customer, moves through 6 predictable psychological stages: resisting to listening, listening to considering, considering to willing to do to doing, doing to glad they did, and continuing. He emphasizes you can't skip steps. Trying to jump from resistance to action is like trying to run before learning to walk. The key is to move people gradually by creating emotional safety at each stage. Let's break this down. Stage 1, from resisting to listening. When someone resists, it means they're protecting themselves. They might be defensive, dismissive, or even hostile. At this point, facts, logic, or persuasion won't work. What works is empathy and validation. The goal here isn't to make them agree, it's to make them feel safe enough to listen. To achieve that, use what Goulston calls the diffusing statement. Instead of arguing, say something like, "You probably have every right to feel the way you do." This instantly lowers tension. You've acknowledged their feelings, not contradicted them. That emotional validation opens the door to the next stage, listening. Example, a manager faced an angry employee demanding a raise. Instead of explaining budget constraints, the manager said, "It sounds like you're feeling underappreciated and stuck. Am I right?" The employee paused, nodded, and started talking calmly. That's the power of diffusing emotion before offering logic. Stage 2, from listening to considering. Once someone feels safe, they begin to actually listen, but that doesn't mean they're convinced. At this stage, you need to show that you truly understand their world. Goulston recommends active curiosity. Ask gentle, open-ended questions that encourage reflection. "Can you walk me through what you're thinking?" Or, "What would make this work better for you?" The goal is not to manipulate, but to illuminate their perspective, to make them feel seen and respected. Once they sense that you genuinely care about their point of view, they start to consider yours. Stage 3, from considering to willing to do. Now the person is starting to see possibilities. They're not yet ready to act, but they're no longer resisting. Here, Goulston advises introducing small, low-risk commitments. Instead of saying, "Let's completely change our strategy," say, "Would you be open to testing this for a week?" This reduces psychological friction. People are more likely to agree when the first step feels manageable. He calls this technique the power of the small yes. Every yes builds momentum for the next one. Example, a sales consultant trying to win over a hesitant client didn't ask for a full contract immediately. Instead, he said, "Would you be open to a short trial project?" That small yes turned into a long-term partnership. Stage 4, from willing to doing. At this point, people are emotionally on your side, but hesitation can still hold them back. Goulston recommends removing any lingering fear or confusion by reinforcing clarity and confidence. Use positive reinforcement. "You've got great instincts about this. I really think this step will work well for you." Also, reaffirm shared goals. "We both want to see this succeed. Let's take that first step together." Encouragement and shared ownership transform willingness into action.
Stage 5, from doing to glad they did. Once someone acts on your idea, reinforce their decision emotionally. This final stage turns a one-time action into long-term commitment. Goulston suggests offering emotional rewards, not just logical feedback. Say things like, "I really appreciate how open-minded you've been. It takes courage to try something new, and you did it." When people feel good about saying yes, they're more likely to keep saying yes in the future. A real story from conflict to cooperation. Goulston shares an experience from his work as a crisis psychiatrist. A police officer was trying to negotiate with a suicidal man on a ledge. The man kept shouting, "Leave me alone!" Instead of arguing or promising solutions, the officer said softly, "You sound like you've been fighting alone for a long time." The man froze. Then tears welled up in his eyes. Slowly, he replied,
"Yeah, I'm tired." That moment of emotional recognition moved him from resisting to listening. Within minutes, he stepped back to safety. The persuasion cycle wasn't just theory, it saved a life. Why logic fails without empathy. Goulston warns that many communicators make a fatal mistake. They lead with facts before addressing feelings. But as he writes, you can't reason with someone who's emotionally flooded. Think of the brain like a two-tiered system. The amygdala controls survival emotions like fear and anger. The neocortex handles logic and reasoning. When the amygdala is activated by criticism, pressure, or fear, it shuts down the neocortex. That's why people argue irrationally or shut down during conflict. Empathy reactivates the rational brain by calming the emotional one. That's the science behind the persuasion cycle. The magic phrase technique. When dealing with resistance, Goulston offers a simple but potent phrase. What would it take for you to feel comfortable with this idea? This question transforms confrontation into collaboration. It shifts the focus from defending to problem-solving. Instead of pushing, you're inviting them to participate in the solution, and psychologically, people are far more invested in ideas they helped shape. Practical applications. In leadership, before announcing new changes, take time to acknowledge your team's fears. Start meetings with, "I know change can be uncomfortable. Let's talk about what's worrying you first." This builds trust before transition. In relationships, when arguing with your partner, don't rush to solutions. Say, "Help me understand what's frustrating you most right now." This lowers emotional barriers and moves the conversation toward resolution. In sales and negotiations, avoid overwhelming your client with details. First, get them emotionally aligned. Say, "I get that this feels risky. What would make it feel safer for you?" Once they feel heard, persuasion becomes natural. Key lessons from Chapter 5. Persuasion is not about pushing harder, it's about moving slower. Emotions always precede logic. Calm the heart before convincing the mind. Validation builds trust faster than arguments ever will. The persuasion cycle helps you meet people where they are, not where you wish they were. Every conversation is an emotional journey. Guide people gently through it. Final thoughts. The persuasion cycle teaches us that influence isn't about overpowering others, it's about understanding them. When you lead people through empathy, you transform resistance into cooperation, and cooperation into commitment. As Goulston puts it, the shortest distance between two people is not a straight line. It's a curve that bends through the heart.
Chapter 6, The Power of Mirror Neurons, How to Create Instant Connection and Trust. In Chapter 6 of Just Listen, Mark Goulston dives deep into one of the most fascinating discoveries in modern neuroscience, mirror neurons, and how understanding them can transform the way we connect, communicate, and build trust. He calls mirror neurons the empathy cells of the brain. These tiny clusters of nerve cells are responsible for our ability to feel what others feel. They're the reason why we wince when someone gets hurt or smile when we see someone laughing. When we observe another person's emotion, our brain subconsciously mirrors it, as if we're living that same emotion ourselves. Goulston's insight is simple but profound. If you want to get through to people, you must first get your mirror neurons in sync with theirs. The science of connection, how mirror neurons work. Discovered in the early 1990s by neuroscientists studying monkeys, mirror neurons fire both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else performing that same action. For example, if you see someone sip coffee, the same neurons that would activate if you were drinking it yourself light up in your brain. This mirroring effect is not just physical, it's emotional. When you see someone smile, your brain feels their happiness. When someone looks sad, your brain experiences their sadness in microbursts. Goulston explains, mirror neurons are the biological foundation of empathy, the bridge that allows two minds to connect emotionally before they connect logically. This means emotional connection is not just psychological, it's physiological. You literally can't connect with someone if your emotional states are out of sync. Why this matters in communication. When someone is angry, afraid, or defensive, their mirror neurons are broadcasting distress.
If you respond with irritation or impatience, your own emotional state mirrors theirs and the tension escalates. But if you remain calm, empathetic, and centered, your composure activates their mirror neurons to match your state instead. In other words, your calm can calm them. This is one of Goulston's most powerful insights. Emotional control is contagious. He writes, "The fastest way to influence another person's mood is to manage your own." The emotional echo effect. Goulston introduces a concept he calls the emotional echo effect. Whatever emotional signal you project, consciously or unconsciously, bounces back to you amplified. If you project calm, you get cooperation. If you project tension, you get resistance. If you project empathy, you get openness. This is why great communicators often seem to magnetically attract trust. Their internal state creates a field of emotional safety that others instinctively pick up on. The case of the angry executive. Goulston shares a story about coaching a frustrated executive who couldn't connect with his team. The man complained that his employees were lazy and unmotivated. Goulston observed one of his meetings and noticed his body language: rigid posture, clipped tone, and a subtle scowl. When the executive asked for input, the team stayed silent. Afterwards, Goulston pointed out, "You say you want engagement, but your tone says you're angry. Your team's mirror neurons are picking up your frustration and responding with fear." The executive was stunned. Over the next few weeks, he practiced softening his voice, maintaining eye contact, and showing appreciation before giving feedback. Gradually, his team began speaking up more, offering ideas and even joking with him. His mirror neurons, once radiating tension, were now radiating trust.
How to activate positive mirroring. Goulston outlines several practical steps to consciously trigger mirror neuron alignment. 1. Be the emotional tone you want to create. If you want calm, be calm. If you want openness, be open. People unconsciously synchronize with your emotional rhythm. When you walk into a tense meeting, take a slow breath, lower your shoulders, and project warmth through your facial expressions. Your presence can reset the room's emotional temperature within seconds. 2. Use soft eyes and a gentle tone. Harsh eye contact or a clipped voice triggers defensiveness. Soft eyes, relaxed, caring, curious, signal safety. Similarly, a slower, even tone activates the listener's parasympathetic nervous system, reducing stress and creating trust. When you walk into a tense meeting, take a slow breath, lower your shoulders, and project warmth through your facial expressions. Your presence can reset the room's emotional temperature within seconds. 3. Mirror their body language subtly. If someone leans forward, you can lean slightly forward too. If they speak softly, lower your volume to match. This isn't mimicry, it's synchrony. Done naturally, it sends a subconscious signal. We're in sync. You're safe here. 4. Reflect emotions, not words. Instead of saying, "So you don't like the new policy," say, "You seem really frustrated by how things have changed." This emotional mirroring communicates empathy on a deeper level. The mirror moment technique. One of Goulston's signature exercises is called the mirror moment. When you sense resistance or disconnection in a conversation, pause and silently ask yourself, what's really going on with them emotionally right now? That question pulls you out of your own head and shifts your attention to the other person's emotional state. Once you identify it, anger, fear, sadness, shame, you can adjust your tone and body language to match and then gently lead them toward calm. For example, if someone is anxious, speak slower, nod reassuringly, and lower your pitch slightly. The mirror neurons will pick up on your calmness, helping them relax. How mirror neurons build trust. Trust, Goulston explains, isn't built through words. It's built through felt safety. When someone's mirror neurons tell them you're safe with this person, they become more open to your ideas and influence. That's why genuine empathy can't be faked. Mirror neurons detect emotional authenticity. If you pretend to care while secretly judging someone, your body language, tone, and microexpressions will betray you. True connection requires emotional congruence. Your feelings, words, and behavior must all align. A simple example: the power of presence. Goulston tells the story of a nurse who transformed her patient care simply by using mirror neurons intentionally. Before entering a patient's room, she would take a deep breath and silently think, "This person is scared. I'm here to comfort them." Within days, she noticed patients became calmer and more cooperative. One elderly man told her, "When you walk in, the whole room feels peaceful." She hadn't changed her words, just her energy. That's mirror neurons at work. Why listening deepens mirroring. When you listen, truly listen, you're creating a powerful mirror moment. As Goulston explains, when someone feels heard, their brain syncs with yours. Their defenses drop. Their mind opens. That's why he emphasizes listening before persuading. Active listening triggers emotional alignment, which then opens the door to rational influence. The mirror neuron trap. Negative contagion. Just as positivity is contagious, so is negativity. If you absorb too much of someone's anger or anxiety, your mirror neurons may start replicating that emotion, making you reactive. Goulston warns against becoming an emotional sponge. Instead, he suggests creating an empathic boundary. Acknowledge others' emotions without letting them hijack yours. He advises repeating silently, "Their feelings are not my fault. They're just feelings passing through." This keeps you centered while still being compassionate. Practical applications. In leadership, before addressing your team, take a minute to ground yourself emotionally. Enter the room calm and confident. Your team will mirror your stability. In relationships, when your partner is upset, resist the urge to fix or argue. Simply say, "You seem really hurt by what happened." That emotional reflection builds safety and connection instantly. In customer interactions, when dealing with an angry client, start by acknowledging their frustration. Maintain steady eye contact, an even tone, and patient body language. Within minutes, their emotional energy will align with yours. Key lessons from Chapter 6. Mirror neurons are the biological foundation of empathy. Emotional states are contagious. Calm spreads calm. Anger spreads anger. You influence others best when your internal state is stable and genuine. Trust grows when people feel safe, not when they're simply told to trust. Listening and emotional attunement activate mirror neurons faster than words ever can. Final thoughts. In this chapter, Goulston teaches us that real communication isn't about talking better. It's about feeling together. When your emotions and intentions align with compassion and calmness, others can't help but mirror that state. You become a beacon of safety and influence in a noisy, reactive world. As he writes, when you master the art of emotional mirroring, you don't have to push people to listen. They lean in on their own.
Chapter 7. Become the person people tell the truth to. Building radical trust. In Chapter 7 of Just Listen, Mark Goulston moves from breaking through to something deeper. How to become the kind of person people instinctively open up to. The person they'll tell the truth to, even when the truth is hard. This chapter isn't about clever lines or techniques alone. It's about building a reputation and presence that invites honesty, vulnerability, and real conversations. Goulston's core message here is simple and radical. People share truth with those who make them feel safe, seen, and unjudged. If you can consistently create that emotional environment, you will get better information, solve real problems, and build relationships that last. Lesson 1. Truth comes from safety, not interrogation. People lie, hide, or distort facts when they fear consequences, judgment, punishment, loss of status, or ridicule. So the first step is to eliminate perceived threats. Goulston illustrates this with a theme repeated throughout the book. Don't make people wrong for being human.
Instead, make it easy for them to admit the human truth. What this looks like in practice. Don't rush to blame. Before asking for facts, acknowledge the likely emotion. That must have been frustrating. Remove punitive language. Replace "what happened" or "why did you do that" with "help me understand how this unfolded for you." Offer confidentiality or discretion when appropriate. People reveal far more when they trust the conversation won't be used against them. Story. Goulston recalls helping a manager whose direct reports hid mistakes for fear of being fired. After he shifted to a non-punitive response, starting every problem conversation with, "We'll fix this together, tell me what you know," the team's reporting improved dramatically, and small issues were addressed before they became crises. Lesson 2. Confess first. Vulnerability invites reciprocity. A surprisingly effective method to trigger honesty is confessing a small imperfection or limitation first. When you show vulnerability before asking for truth, you normalize openness and lower the other person's guard. Why it works? Social psychology shows that reciprocity applies to vulnerability as well as favors. When you reveal a weakness, the other person is more likely to reciprocate with candor. How to use it? Begin with a brief self-disclosure. "I didn't see this coming either. I should have anticipated it." Or admit uncertainty. "I might be wrong about this, and I really need your perspective." Then ask your question. "Can you tell me what you think happened?" Practical tip? Keep the confession concise and genuine, not theatrical. Insincerity is obvious and backfires. Lesson 3. Ask the right kinds of questions. Getting truth depends a lot on how you ask. Open-ended, non-threatening questions coax detail. Yes-no interrogation invites evasion. Powerful question types Goulston recommends. Curiosity questions. What happened from your point of view? Clarifying questions. Can you give me an example? Exploratory questions. What were you worried would happen? Permission questions. Would you be willing to tell me what really went on? Technique. Pair a question with a short validating statement. "I don't want to jump to conclusions. I'd like to understand. Would you tell me what happened?" Validation plus curiosity equals truth. Lesson 4. Use micro-confessions to test honesty. If you suspect someone is withholding, Goulston suggests a micro-confession test. Offer a small, plausible admission before asking the hard question. If they respond in kind, with detail or an admission, you've signaled a safe space. If they deflect, you know the wall is still up. Example. A salesperson consistently missed numbers. The manager said, "I've missed deals by not following up too. I get how it happens. Walk me through your pipeline." The rep then admitted he'd let calls slip because of unrealistic territory. The manager could then co-create practical solutions. Lesson 5. The power of "I need your help." One of Goulston's favorite simple lines is, "I need your help." It disarms ego and activates people's identity as competent contributors. Rather than ordering or blaming, you invite ownership and honest input. Why it works? When a project stalls, "I need your help to understand where this bottleneck is." With a family member, "I could use your help making this easier. Tell me what's getting in the way." At work, "Can you help me see what I'm missing here?" Lesson 6. Give people an exit while they tell the truth. People fear that honesty will lead to harsh consequences. Goulston teaches a compassionate tactic. Give them a path out, a way to tell the truth that also preserves dignity and opens a route to repair. Phrases that offer an exit. "If you could do it over, what would you change? What would make this easier to fix together? We all make mistakes. How can we move forward?" This approach signals that the conversation is about solutions, not punishment, making truth-telling a constructive act. Practical checklist. Be the person people tell the truth to. Create safety first. Lead with empathy, not accusation. Confess a small vulnerability. Model the openness you want. Ask non-judgmental, open-ended questions. Encourage story, not defense. Use "I need your help." Invite contribution, reduce shame. Offer an exit and a path to repair. Make honesty low risk and useful. Follow up with action. Don't simply listen. Act on what you hear. That proves truth-telling pays off. Story: turning an employee's silence into a life-saving decision. Goulston shares a powerful corporate vignette. A technical team repeatedly failed to flag a safety defect to leadership. Engineers feared retribution. A new director implemented a different approach. Every incident meeting opened with, "Tell me what you know. Nothing we hear will be used against you. We'll fix it together." He also began each meeting by admitting he'd missed warning signs in his prior role. Slowly, the team began reporting near misses. One such report revealed a design flaw that could have caused catastrophic failure. Because the director had created psychological safety and modeled vulnerability, that near miss became a corrective action that averted disaster. Final reflection: truth is a gift you earn, not command. Chapter 7's ultimate teaching is moral and practical at once. People give you truth when you give them safety, respect, and the chance to remain human. Becoming that person takes intention, a steady, non-performative presence of empathy, humility, and curiosity. It's not a quick trick. It's a way of relating. When you earn the reputation of being trustworthy and non-judgmental, your conversations change. Problems are surfaced early. Relationships deepen. Decisions are better, and influence grows. Quietly, steadily, sustainably. As Goulston might say, if you want the truth, be the kind of person who deserves the truth.
Chapter 8. The Power of Listening Without Judgment. Imagine sitting across from someone who's visibly upset, venting about their frustrations. Your instinct might be to jump in, to correct them, fix the problem, or explain why they're wrong. But what if, instead, you simply paused, leaned in slightly, and said, In Just Listen, Dr. Mark Goulston reveals that this small, thoughtful sound, is one of the most powerful tools you can use to connect deeply with another person. It conveys openness, curiosity, and non-judgment. It invites the speaker to continue, to feel safe, and to explore their own thoughts. Lesson 1. The magic of non-judgmental curiosity. When people feel judged, they shut down. They defend themselves instead of opening up. But Goulston emphasizes that curiosity without judgment is the bridge between disconnection and understanding. Saying, helps in two subtle but profound ways. It slows you down. You stop reacting emotionally or intellectually and give space for the other person to speak. It validates the other person's experience. You're not agreeing or disagreeing, you're acknowledging that what they feel or say matters. This small pause can diffuse tension faster than any argument ever could. It's not about solving the problem, but about being present in the moment. Lesson 2. The mirror neuron connection. Our brains contain mirror neurons, cells that reflect the emotions and actions of others. When you express calm curiosity, the other person subconsciously mirrors your state. If you meet anger with defensiveness, the anger escalates. But if you meet anger with calm curiosity, saying, that's interesting, tell me more, the emotional temperature drops. This works because your tone and demeanor communicate safety. People want to be heard more than they want to be right. By using instead of counterarguments, you create a zone of empathy where real communication can happen. Lesson 3. Listening to what's not being said. Dr. Goulston suggests that in every conversation there are 3 levels: what people say, what they mean, and what they're feeling. Most of us only respond to level 1, the words, but the real message is often hidden in levels 2 and 3. For example, if someone says, "I guess I'm just not good enough for this job," you might feel tempted to reassure them. But if you pause and say softly, and then, "What makes you feel that way?" you invite them to explore the deeper meaning behind their words. This transforms a surface conversation into a healing dialogue. Lesson 4. The Zen of Listening.
The technique aligns closely with the Zen concept of beginner's mind, the idea of approaching each moment with openness and without assumptions. When you listen this way, you aren't trying to prove anything. You're not trying to win. You're just being with the person. Goulston calls this bearing witness. It's about holding space for someone's pain, confusion, or joy without trying to control it. When people feel witnessed, they heal. When they feel judged, they hide.
Lesson 5. Using silence as a tool. Silence often feels uncomfortable, but it's one of your greatest allies in communication. After saying, don't rush to fill the silence. Wait. The pause encourages the other person to keep talking, to dig deeper. Silence signals confidence. It tells the other person, I'm not afraid of your emotions. In therapy, in negotiations, and even in relationships, the most profound insights often emerge in those quiet spaces after a Real-world example. The angry client. Imagine you're a customer service representative and a client calls in furious about a delay. Instead of defending yourself, you take a deep breath and respond, it sounds like this delay really caused a lot of frustration for you. Instantly, the client feels acknowledged. Their anger softens because they don't have to fight to be heard. Once the emotion settles, real problem-solving can begin. This small act of empathy can turn confrontation into cooperation. Lesson 6. The 3-step approach. Goulston outlines a simple method for using effectively. Pause before reacting. When someone says something provocative, resist the urge to respond immediately. Breathe and softly say, This shows curiosity, not challenge. Ask a gentle follow-up question. Try, can you tell me more about what you mean? Or, how long have you felt that way? This method can be used in personal relationships, leadership, therapy, or sales, anywhere empathy matters. Lesson 7. The ripple effect of genuine listening. When you consistently use to stay open and non-judgmental, you start noticing a shift in your interactions. People become more honest with you. Conflicts de-escalate quickly. You gain access to deeper trust and loyalty. People don't remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel. And nothing makes people feel more respected than being listened to without judgment. Practical applications. In relationships, use instead of you always during disagreements. It transforms blame into curiosity. In leadership, when an employee complains, respond with, tell me more about that. It signals openness to feedback. In parenting, when a child misbehaves, replace punishment with curiosity. What made you decide to do that? It teaches emotional awareness. In negotiations, can diffuse tension and create a sense of calm professionalism that makes the other party more cooperative. Key takeaways. The word, is more powerful than many full sentences. It signals curiosity and compassion. Listening without judgment unlocks trust, openness, and emotional safety. You don't have to fix people, you just have to hear them. Silence and patience are essential parts of real communication. Final reflection. The strength in softness. In a world that glorifies speaking, just listen reminds us that true strength lies in listening. Might seem small, but it's a signal of something vast. Emotional intelligence, empathy, and control. When you master this kind of listening, you stop trying to change others and start changing the conversation itself.
Chapter 9. How to make the impossible possible, turning resistance into cooperation. In Chapter 9 of Just Listen, Mark Goulston tackles one of the hardest human challenges, dealing with people who say no. Whether it's a boss who won't listen, a partner who refuses to compromise, or a client who's emotionally shut down, this chapter reveals the psychology and techniques behind transforming resistance into cooperation, even when the odds seem impossible. At the core of this chapter lies one truth. When people resist you, they're not rejecting your ideas, they're protecting their emotions. Goulston teaches that before you can change someone's mind, you must first change their emotional state. And that begins with understanding what resistance really is. Fear disguised as stubbornness, pride, or anger. Mentis lesson number 1. Understand the source of resistance. Goulston opens by explaining that resistance is not logical. When people push back, it's rarely because of the content of your request. It's because they feel unsafe, misunderstood, or powerless. He breaks resistance into 3 layers. Fear, what if I fail? Ego, you're making me feel wrong or stupid. Control, I feel trapped or forced. Trying to convince someone in this state only strengthens their defenses. The harder you push, the harder they dig in. So instead of trying to overpower resistance, you must disarm it, gently and empathetically. Goulston's key rule: don't push back against resistance, lean into it, understand it, and then guide it forward. Mirror their emotions before their logic. Goulston's most effective communication technique is mirror listening. When someone resists or gets defensive, the instinct is to argue, but the right move is to reflect what they're feeling. Here's how it works. Listen carefully for emotion beneath the words, then mirror it back calmly. For example, them, this plan won't work. We've tried that before. You, it sounds like you're frustrated because we've been down this road and it didn't deliver. That simple reflection acknowledges their feelings without judgment. You're not agreeing that they're right. You're validating that they feel heard. And when people feel heard, their emotional brain calms down, allowing their rational brain to re-engage. Goulston likens this to emotional judo, using their energy not against them, but to guide the conversation back into flow. Mentis lesson number 3. The 3-step method to overcome resistance. To move them from resisting to listening. Use empathy and validation. Don't argue. Acknowledge their feelings and perspective. For example, I get that you're concerned about this approach. It's smart to be cautious. Move them from listening to considering. Once they relax, invite curiosity, not commitment. For example, would it be okay if I showed you a version that might address your concern? Move them from considering to doing. Only after they start thinking with you, not against you, should you propose action. For example, how about we test it small first so there's no big risk?
Lesson 4. The exorcism of resistance technique. In one of the most memorable parts of the chapter, Goulston describes what he calls an exorcism of resistance. It's not as dramatic as it sounds. It's a way to help people name and release the hidden fears behind their resistance. The technique? Ask gently but directly. What are you most afraid would happen if you said yes? This question invites self-reflection. Often, people themselves don't know what's driving their refusal. They just feel unsafe. When they articulate the fear out loud, like, "I'm afraid I'll fail again," or "I'm afraid it'll backfire," the resistance begins to lose its power. Once the fear is named, you can address it concretely. Let's minimize that risk. Here's how we can protect you from that outcome. What would make this feel safer for you? This approach turns you from an opponent into an ally. Lesson 5. Use the magic paradox technique. Goulston introduces a brilliant conversational move called the magic paradox. When someone is stubbornly resistant, instead of trying to convince them, agree with them in an unexpected, empathetic way. Example: them, I don't think your plan will work. You might be right, maybe it won't. What do you see that makes you think that? This paradoxical response disarms the other person. They expect you to fight back, but you validate their intelligence instead. The power struggle vanishes, and suddenly they start explaining their reasoning. That's your entry point for influence. The paradox works because it removes the threat to their ego. People stop resisting once they realize you're not trying to make them wrong. Lesson 6. Give people a win before you ask for one from them. One of the most practical insights in this chapter is psychological reciprocity. When people feel like they've already won something in the interaction, recognition, respect, or understanding, they become more open to giving something back. How to use it? Compliment them on a valid concern. That's a really sharp observation. Acknowledge effort. I can see how much thought you've already put into this. Validate experience. You've seen this type of challenge before. Your instincts are worth listening to. Once they feel valued, they subconsciously want to maintain that mutual respect and are more likely to meet you halfway. Lesson 7. Turn obstacles into ownership. People resist when they feel powerless, so flip that dynamic by giving them partial control over the solution. Ask, what would make this idea work for you? Or, what do you think would make this plan stronger? Or even, if we did this your way, how would it look? This strategy gives them ownership. Once they shape the solution, it becomes their idea, and resistance transforms into advocacy. Practical example, from corporate standoff to collaboration. Goulston shares the story of a manager trying to implement a new software system. The department head was openly resistant, dismissing every proposal. Instead of pushing harder, the manager applied Goulston's techniques. Mirror. It sounds like you've seen too many of these rollouts fail before. Validate. I'd be frustrated too if that kept happening. Ask the magic paradox. You might be right that this system won't solve it. What do you see that makes you think that? This disarmed the executive. He admitted he'd been burned before because no one involved him early enough in the process. The manager then said, "That makes total sense. Would you help me make sure this rollout avoids those mistakes?" By the end, the resistant leader became the rollout's biggest champion. The key? The manager stopped arguing and started listening resistance into cooperation. Lesson 8. Recognize when no is a boundary, not a barrier. Sometimes resistance isn't an obstacle to overcome. It's a legitimate boundary. Goulston cautions that the goal is not to manipulate people, but to respect their autonomy. When someone's no comes from deep personal or ethical grounds, pushing further erodes trust. Your role is to understand the why behind the boundary and either work around it or collaborate on alternative solutions. This balance between empathy and respect is what separates influence from manipulation. Everyday practice: how to turn no into tell me more. Pause your reflex to persuade. Instead, identify emotion first. Mirror their concern. Use calm, reflective phrases. Validate and empathize. You're right to be cautious. Invite collaboration. How would you improve it? End with shared control. Let's test this your way. These steps allow people to move emotionally from defensive to curious, from against you to with you. Story: The Parent and the Defiant Teenager. One of Goulston's favorite stories involved a father who couldn't get through to his teenage son. Every attempt at discipline led to shouting matches. Following Goulston's advice, the father stopped arguing and simply said, "You're right. I don't understand what it's like to be you right now. Can you help me see it from your side?" The boy was stunned. For the first time, his father wasn't trying to control him. He was listening. That shift dissolved months of tension. They began to rebuild a relationship rooted in respect, not resistance. Final reflection: influence through understanding. Chapter 9 ends with a profound insight. When you stop trying to win, you start to connect. And once you connect, winning happens naturally. Influence isn't about overpowering others. It's about helping them feel understood, safe, and respected. Once resistance melts, possibility opens. The most powerful communicators don't force agreement. They create alignment. And alignment always begins with empathy.
Chapter 10. Get through to yourself first. Before you can connect with others, you must first master the art of connecting with yourself. This is the essence of Chapter 10 in Just Listen. Mark Goulston argues that self-communication, understanding your own emotions, motives, and mental blocks, is the foundation of every successful interaction. When you're at peace internally, your external communication becomes clear, confident, and authentic. This chapter is about self-awareness, emotional regulation, and internal dialogue. Goulston teaches that the key to getting through to others is first to get through to yourself. 1. The inner dialogue, your first conversation.
Every conversation you have with another person is influenced by the one you're having with yourself. Your self-talk, that running inner dialogue, shapes how you see the world and respond to people. If your self-talk is filled with doubt, fear, or criticism, you project defensiveness or insecurity in your communication. But if your internal dialogue is calm and compassionate, you radiate confidence and empathy. Mark Goulston writes, "The first person you need to listen to, truly listen to, is you." He encourages readers to regularly pause and observe their thoughts. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What triggered this emotion? Am I reacting or responding? By acknowledging your emotions instead of suppressing them, you gain clarity. And clarity leads to control. 2. The power of self-empathy. We often extend empathy to others, but deny it to ourselves. Goulston calls this self-empathy, the ability to understand and accept your own emotional experiences without judgment. When you make a mistake, your internal critic often says, "I'm such an idiot." Self-empathy replaces that with, "I made a mistake, but I can learn from it." This subtle shift transforms your mindset from shame to growth. Practicing self-empathy helps you manage difficult emotions before they control your behavior. It's especially important in high-stress conversations. If you can soothe your internal tension, you prevent emotional escalation. Goulston suggests a simple exercise. Name the emotion you're feeling, e.g., "I'm angry" or "I'm hurt." Ask why you feel this way, and offer yourself the same compassion you would offer a close friend. When you master self-empathy, you stop reacting impulsively and start communicating intentionally. 4. The mirror effect. Seeing yourself clearly. Many people struggle to connect because they don't see themselves as others do. They are unaware of how their tone, body language, or emotional energy affects others. Goulston calls this the mirror effect, the process of reflecting on your behavior from an outside perspective. Imagine standing outside yourself and watching your interactions. Ask, what message am I really sending? How does my presence make others feel? Would I want to talk to me? This exercise promotes self-awareness and helps you identify patterns that sabotage communication, defensiveness, sarcasm, or impatience. The more you understand your own emotional patterns, the easier it becomes to break free from them. 5. The dead-end dialogue. One of the biggest barriers to self-connection is negative inner dialogue. Goulston calls these dead-end dialogues, mental loops that drain energy and reinforce self-doubt. Examples include, "No one listens to me. I always mess things up. What's the point in trying?" These thoughts limit your confidence and prevent growth. To escape them, Goulston recommends reframing. Turn "no one listens to me" into "how can I communicate so others want to listen?" Turn "I always fail" into "what can I learn from this setback?" This reframing process transforms frustration into curiosity and helps you regain control over your internal world.
5. The three-part self-dialogue technique. Goulston introduces a powerful method for self-understanding called the three-part self-dialogue. The observer, the rational part of your mind that notices what's happening, the critic, the inner voice that points out your flaws and fears, the nurturer, the compassionate part that offers understanding and balance. When you're in conflict or emotional turmoil, let these three voices talk. The observer gathers facts, the critic expresses concerns, the nurturer provides reassurance. By allowing these voices to interact, you create inner balance. This inner harmony radiates outward, making your communication with others more calm and centered. 6. Emotional honesty, the gateway to inner peace. Many people suppress emotions because they fear vulnerability, but emotional honesty is not weakness, it's strength. Goulston argues that acknowledging your feelings allows you to manage them. Denying them gives them power. He gives the example of a CEO who constantly snapped at his team. In coaching sessions, Goulston discovered the man wasn't angry, he was afraid of losing control. Once he admitted his fear,
his communication softened, and his team responded with greater respect and trust. The lesson: when you name your emotions, you reclaim your power. A simple phrase Goulston uses is, name it to tame it. If you're anxious, admit it. If you're hurt, acknowledge it. Emotional honesty clears the mental fog and makes your words authentic. 7. The pause and pivot practice. Before responding in emotionally charged moments, Goulston recommends a mindful practice called pause and pivot. Pause, stop, and take a slow, deep breath. This interrupts your reactive patterns. Pivot, redirect your focus from emotion to intention. Ask, what's the outcome I want here? This 5-second pause can prevent days of regret. It allows your rational mind to regain control over your emotional impulses. Practicing this daily, even during small frustrations, builds emotional resilience. 8. Getting through to yourself in stressful situations. In high-pressure moments, arguments, workplace tension, or personal conflict, your body activates a fight-or-flight response. Goulston explains that your amygdala, the brain's fear center, hijacks logical thinking. To restore calm, he recommends deep breathing, slows down the stress response, grounding statements, I'm safe, I can handle this. Perspective shift, this moment won't define me. When you regulate your own emotions, you become a safe emotional presence for others. People naturally open up to those who remain calm under pressure. 9. Reconnecting with your why. Goulston emphasizes the importance of reconnecting with your purpose, your why. When you're grounded in what truly matters, you communicate with clarity and conviction. Ask yourself, why do I want to connect with this person? What do I hope to achieve? Understanding? Peace? Collaboration? How does this conversation align with my values? When your words come from purpose rather than ego, they carry power and sincerity. 10. Daily practices to strengthen self-connection. Here are a few practical exercises Goulston recommends to get through to yourself every day. Morning reflection. Spend 5 minutes checking in with your emotions before the day begins. Journaling. Write freely about what's bothering or inspiring you. Mindful listening to yourself. Pay attention to how your body reacts to stress, tension, fatigue, restlessness. Affirmations. Replace self-doubt with grounded, realistic affirmations like, I can handle this, or my peace matters. Self-forgiveness. Let go of the past. Remind yourself, I did the best I could with what I knew then. Each of these practices builds emotional clarity and helps you stay centered even when life feels chaotic. 11. The ultimate lesson. Inner calm creates outer connection. The final takeaway of this chapter is that true communication starts from the inside out. You can't calm others if you're not calm within. You can't make people feel seen if you ignore your own emotions. Mark Goulston writes, when you can get through to yourself, when you can soothe your inner chaos, you become a refuge for others. That's what great listeners, leaders, and communicators do. They project peace, not pressure. They inspire openness by being open themselves. Practical reflection for listeners, audio growth library style. Tonight, before you sleep, take 3 minutes to listen to your inner voice. What is it saying? Is it harsh or kind? Practice self-empathy. Tell yourself, I see you, I hear you, I've got your back. The more you connect with yourself, the stronger your ability becomes to connect with others, gently, powerfully, and authentically.
Chapter 11. When all else fails, empathize. Empathy is the ultimate bridge between hearts and minds. It's the language that transcends logic, the emotional key that unlocks even the most closed-off person. In this chapter, Mark Goulston reveals a simple yet profound truth. When every communication strategy fails,
When arguments, reasoning, or charm no longer work, empathy remains the one force that never does. Goulston insists that empathy is not about agreeing with someone or fixing their problem. It's about feeling with them, stepping into their emotional world so they know they're not alone. When people feel truly seen, they naturally lower their defenses. This chapter teaches how to make that happen in both your personal and professional life. Number 1. The heart of empathy. Empathy is not sympathy. Sympathy says, I feel sorry for you. Empathy says, I understand what it feels like to be you. Goulston writes, empathy is the doorway to influence, persuasion, and healing. It's the moment another person realizes you get them. When someone is upset, defensive, or uncooperative, they don't want advice or logic. They want connection. Logic appeals to the head, but empathy speaks to the heart, and the heart is the gatekeeper to the mind. The first step toward empathy is simply listening without agenda. No interruptions, no waiting for your turn to speak, just silence and presence. When you do this, something powerful happens. People stop seeing you as an opponent and start seeing you as an ally. Number 2. The mirror neuron effect. Goulston explains the neuroscience behind empathy. Inside your brain are mirror neurons, cells that activate both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else doing it. That's why you cringe when you see someone fall, or smile when you see someone laugh. Your brain mirrors the emotions of others. It's wired for empathy. When you respond with genuine empathy, you trigger the same mirroring effect in the other person. They begin to feel your calmness, your openness, and your understanding. Their emotional state begins to align with yours. This is why staying calm and compassionate, even when someone else is angry or irrational, can de-escalate conflict almost magically. Number 3. The power of saying, that sounds technique. One of Goulston's simplest but most effective tools is the that sounds technique. Instead of giving advice or challenging someone's feelings, reflect their emotion back to them. That sounds frustrating. That sounds like it really hurt. Or that sounds disappointing. These small phrases communicate empathy instantly. They tell the person, you're not crazy, your feelings make sense. This validation diffuses anger, resentment, or defensiveness because people no longer need to fight to be understood. Example. Imagine your coworker says, no one appreciates how hard I work. Instead of responding, that's not true, say, that sounds exhausting to feel like your efforts go unnoticed. This doesn't mean you agree, it means you understand, and that understanding changes everything. Number 4. The empathy judo technique. Goulston calls empathy a form of emotional judo, using another person's emotional momentum to create connection instead of resistance. When someone attacks you verbally, your instinct is to defend yourself or counterattack, but Goulston suggests a different approach: absorb and redirect. Example. If someone says, you don't care about this project at all, you could reply defensively or with empathy. It sounds like you're really frustrated and feeling unsupported. Tell me what's been going on. This flips the dynamic. You move from adversary to ally, and the other person shifts from aggression to openness. Empathy judo isn't about giving up. It's about guiding the conversation from conflict to collaboration.
5. The empathy moment. Empathy isn't just a word, it's a moment, a visible emotional shift. You can often see it when it happens. The person's face softens, their shoulders drop, their tone changes, they exhale. It's the moment they go from, you don't get me, to, finally, someone understands. Goulston calls this the empathy moment. It's the turning point in difficult conversations. Once you reach it, communication flows naturally. To create that moment, be completely present, no distractions. Listen beyond the words to the emotion underneath. Reflect that emotion sincerely. Pause, let silence do its work. Sometimes saying less is the most powerful thing you can do. 6. When logic fails, lead with emotion. People in emotional pain can't hear logic. If they're angry, scared, or hurt, their amygdala, the brain's alarm system, takes control, and the rational brain shuts down. So when you try to reason with someone in that state, like calm down or you're overreacting, it backfires. The more you push logic, the more they resist. Goulston advises, lead with emotion, follow with reason. First, calm their emotional brain through empathy. Once they feel heard and safe, then and only then will their logical mind open. Example, if your child says, "I hate school," don't respond with, "You need to go, it's important." Instead say, "It sounds like school's been really tough for you lately." Once they feel understood, they'll be more open to problem solving. Empathy opens the door. Logic walks through it. 7. Recognizing the unheard person. Goulston describes many people as unheard. These are individuals who've spent their lives feeling invisible, their feelings dismissed, their pain ignored. When such people finally encounter empathy, it can be life-changing. Sometimes they burst into tears, sometimes they simply say, "Thank you for listening." He shares the story of a young patient who came to him feeling hopeless and misunderstood. Instead of offering advice, Goulston just listened and said, "It sounds like you've been carrying this weight for a long time." That sentence alone broke through years of silence. Empathy doesn't fix everything, but it begins everything. 8. Empathy in professional life. In business, empathy is often undervalued, yet the best leaders, negotiators, and communicators all rely on it. When Steve Jobs recruited John Scully to Apple, he didn't talk about salary or numbers. He said, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world?" Jobs connected emotionally, to purpose, to identity, and that's what persuaded Scully. Empathy in leadership isn't about softness, it's about understanding what drives people. When you know their fears and aspirations, you can motivate them effectively. Try this at work. Ask your team members how they feel, not just what they think. Validate their frustrations before offering solutions. Listen to the silence. Sometimes it says more than words. Empathy transforms workplaces from rigid hierarchies into human networks. 9. Empathy as healing. Goulston reminds us that empathy is not just a communication skill, it's an act of healing. When you empathize with someone, you give them the emotional oxygen they've been craving. He shares that in his psychiatric practice, empathy often achieved what medication couldn't. When people felt truly understood, their anxiety decreased, their motivation increased, and their relationships improved. He writes, "Empathy tells the wounded part of another person's soul, 'You're safe now.' This emotional safety is what allows growth, change, and reconciliation to happen." 10. Practicing daily empathy. Goulston closes the chapter with practical exercises to cultivate empathy. Empathy pause. Before responding to anyone, take a 2-second pause and ask yourself, what are they feeling right now? Label the emotion. Say it out loud. You seem frustrated, or you sound disappointed. Mirror their body language. Subtly mirror posture or tone to build subconscious rapport. Listen for what's not said. Notice hesitation, silence, or emotional undercurrents. Express genuine curiosity. Ask questions like, "What's been the hardest about this for you?" These small gestures can diffuse tension and create powerful emotional connections. 11. The ultimate lesson. Empathy is influence. When you empathize, you're not losing power, you're gaining it. True influence doesn't come from authority or eloquence, it comes from understanding. People will forget your arguments, your presentations, and even your advice, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. Mark Goulston concludes, "Empathy is not a weakness. It's the strongest form of human communication. When all else fails, it's the one thing that always gets through." Reflection for listeners. Audio growth library style. Next time someone frustrates you, pause before reacting. Ask yourself, what pain might this person be carrying right now? Then listen, not to respond, but to understand. Empathy is not only how you reach others, it's how you rise above yourself.
Chapter 12. The Magic of Hmmm. The Art of Curiosity. When communication breaks down, most people try to push harder, to convince, argue, or explain their point of view. But Mark Goulston suggests something radically different. Pause and say, That one small sound, curious, open, and non-judgmental, can transform the energy of a conversation. It signals that you've stopped reacting and started wondering. In Chapter 12 of Just Listen, Goulston calls this the magic of a tool that unlocks empathy, creativity, and understanding in even the most tense or confusing situations. This chapter is about the power of curiosity, how to replace reaction with reflection and conflict with discovery. 1. Why works. Is not just a sound. It's a mental shift. It turns confrontation into curiosity. When you say instead of defending yourself, you trigger your prefrontal cortex, the rational, problem-solving part of your brain, and deactivate your amygdala, the emotional alarm system. Goulston explains that is the sound of your brain thinking instead of reacting. It also communicates something powerful to the other person. I'm not judging you. I'm interested. That instant change in tone creates psychological safety, which invites openness instead of defensiveness. Imagine two people in conflict. One says, "That's ridiculous," and the other responds with a calm, curious, Who holds more power? The one who stays curious. 2. The science of curiosity. Curiosity activates dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. When you're curious, your brain shifts from anxiety to anticipation, from fight or flight to let's explore. Goulston notes that this state not only reduces stress, but also increases empathy and creative problem-solving. You start looking for solutions instead of villains. That's why great leaders, negotiators, and therapists use curiosity to break down barriers. Curiosity doesn't challenge someone's identity, it invites them to share it. When people feel your genuine curiosity, when they sense that you want to understand them instead of change them, they open up. 3. As an emotional reset. When emotions run high, your nervous system craves space to recover. Gives you that space. Instead of shouting, interrupting, or shutting down, you pause, take a breath, and say, It buys you time to regulate your emotions and signals calmness to others. Think of it as pressing the reset button in a conversation. Goulston calls it emotional aikido. Rather than meeting force with force, you absorb and redirect emotional energy. Disarms aggression, not with resistance, but with curiosity. Example: someone yells, "You never listen to me." Instead of replying defensively, you take a breath and say, Tell me more about that. You've instantly shifted the tone from confrontation to exploration.
4. The power of open-ended curiosity. Is most powerful when followed by open-ended questions, the kind that invite storytelling instead of short answers. Goulston recommends questions like, what makes you feel that way? What's been the hardest part for you? How long has this been going on? What would make things better? These questions give people permission to reveal what's underneath their surface emotion. He writes, when you stop trying to win the argument and start trying to understand the story, you change the entire game. By being curious about their emotions, you uncover their unmet needs, the real source of the conflict. 5. From why to what and how. Goulston warns that not all curiosity helps. The wrong kind of question can make people defensive. Questions starting with why can sound accusatory. Why did you do that? Why are you upset? Instead, use what or how questions. What led you to that decision? How are you feeling about it now? What and how are exploratory. Why is interrogative. Shift your curiosity from judgmental to genuine. This simple linguistic change makes people feel safe, and safe people talk. 6. Curiosity builds connection.
In one of his coaching stories, Goulston describes a CEO known for being impatient and intimidating. His team feared him. During a leadership workshop, Goulston challenged him to replace every interruption or critique with a calm, He reluctantly agreed. A few days later, one of his employees brought a bold idea to a meeting. The CEO's instinct was to dismiss it, but instead he paused, leaned back, and said, That's interesting. Tell me more. The result was, the employee opened up, shared a valuable insight, and the idea eventually became one of the company's most successful projects. By being curious instead of critical, the CEO transformed his reputation and his results. 7. The 3 practice. Goulston introduces a practice to train your brain to respond with curiosity automatically, the 3 technique. Whenever you face something unexpected, irritating, or confusing, take a breath. Say silently or aloud, Ask yourself, what else could be true here? That third step is crucial. It stops you from assuming the worst and opens your mind to multiple possibilities. For instance, if a friend cancels plans, instead of thinking, they don't care, you might think, maybe they're overwhelmed. This mental flexibility keeps you emotionally balanced and compassionate. 8. Using in difficult conversations. Here's how you can use in real life. In arguments, when someone criticizes you, pause and say, It signals composure and curiosity rather than defensiveness. In leadership, when team members share ideas, respond with, to show openness and encourage creativity. In relationships, when your partner expresses frustration, respond with, and then ask, what's making you feel that way? Each creates micro moments of psychological safety. And as Goulston reminds us, safety precedes truth. People open up when they feel safe, not when they feel cornered. 9. Curiosity as the antidote to judgment. Judgment shuts people down. Curiosity opens them up. When you judge, you assume you already know. When you're curious, you admit you don't, and that humility invites connection. He says, the moment you say, you let go of ego and make room for discovery. Even when you're certain someone is wrong, curiosity allows you to understand why they think the way they do. And understanding, not agreement, is what builds bridges. He gives the example of a police negotiator who diffused a tense standoff by saying, you sound like you've been pushed too far. What happened? That one empathetic, curious question started a conversation that saved lives. 10. Rewiring your brain for curiosity. Curiosity isn't just a trait, it's a trainable mindset. To strengthen it, Goulston suggests catch your judgments. Notice when you label something as stupid, wrong, or impossible. Replace it with, Journal with curiosity. When something upsets you, write, what was I really feeling? Model curiosity in others. Praise curiosity when you see it in your children, students, or colleagues. Over time, this rewiring turns curiosity into your default response to stress, confusion, and conflict. 11. The ripple effect of When you adopt a curious mindset, others mirror it. Your calm curiosity reduces tension in the room. Your tone invites exploration. Your body language signals respect. Spreads emotional safety. People around you begin to emulate it, pausing, listening, reflecting. It creates a culture of understanding instead of accusation. As Goulston beautifully puts it, one person's curiosity can transform an entire group's emotional climate. 12. The ultimate lesson: curiosity over control. The magic of teaches a profound truth. You don't need to control every conversation to influence it. When you stop trying to be right and start trying to understand, your influence expands. Curiosity is not passive, it's powerful. It disarms egos, dissolves defensiveness, and deepens relationships. Every you say is a small act of leadership, one that invites cooperation instead of conflict. Goulston ends the chapter with this reflection. In a world obsessed with answers,
The most powerful people are the ones who stay curious. Reflection for listeners. Audio growth library style. Next time someone challenges you, pause. Breathe. Say softly to yourself, Then ask, what might I not be seeing yet? That single moment of curiosity might just turn an argument into understanding and a stranger into an ally.
Chapter 13. The Power of You're Right. Diffusing Conflict Gracefully. In Chapter 13 of Just Listen, Mark Goulston introduces one of the simplest yet most powerful tools in human communication, the phrase, "You're right." At first, it might sound like surrender. It might feel like giving in. But when used correctly, it's neither weakness nor submission. It's emotional jujitsu, a way to release tension, rebuild connection, and move any conversation from resistance to receptivity. This chapter is about mastering the art of strategic empathy, validating the other person's perspective without necessarily agreeing with everything they say. Because the truth is, before anyone can hear your message, they first need to feel heard. 1. Why you're right works like magic. Every argument, conflict, or misunderstanding stems from one root cause. Someone feels unheard. When emotions are high, logic disappears. People stop listening and start defending themselves. They don't want facts, they want acknowledgement. That's where "you're right" becomes magical. It tells the other person, I see you, I get where you're coming from. Those two words can instantly calm an emotional storm. Goulston calls it verbal oxygen, the validation people crave when they're emotionally suffocating. Once they get it, they can breathe again and reason returns. He writes, when you say "you're right," you're not necessarily agreeing with their facts, you're agreeing with their feelings. And that distinction is the heart of effective empathy. 2. The neuroscience of validation. The phrase "you're right" triggers a positive shift in the listener's brain. When someone feels validated, the amygdala, the brain's fear and anger center, quiets down, while the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reasoning, lights up. In other words, "you're right" flips the emotional switch from fight to think. Once the emotional storm subsides, real conversation becomes possible. It's the equivalent of putting out a fire before trying to rebuild the house. 3. You're right versus I'm right. Most people get trapped in the opposite instinct, proving themselves right. But as Goulston explains, when you insist on being right, you force the other person to be wrong, and being wrong feels like humiliation, which triggers defensiveness and resentment. It's a dead end. By contrast, saying "you're right" disarms the ego. It takes the threat out of the interaction. The other person no longer feels attacked or dismissed. Once they relax, they become far more likely to consider your perspective too. Goulston puts it bluntly, you can be right or you can be effective, but rarely both at the same time. 4. Stories that show its power. In one of Goulston's case studies, a married couple was on the verge of separation. The wife complained, "You never listen, you're always buried in work." The husband's instinct was to defend himself, to argue that he was providing for the family. Instead, under Goulston's coaching, he paused and said softly, "You're right. I've been distant lately. I can see how that's hurt you." Silence. Then tears. That single acknowledgement broke months of resentment. Because when people feel seen, they stop fighting to prove their pain. In another example, a CEO was clashing with his CFO over budget priorities. The tension was escalating. Finally, the CEO said, "You're right. I haven't been clear about the long-term vision, and that's created confusion." Immediately, the CFO's tone softened. The conversation shifted from blame to problem-solving. That's the hidden power of "you're right." It lowers emotional walls and opens doors to collaboration. 5. The 3 levels of "you're right." Goulston identifies 3 ways to use "you're right" depending on the situation. Level 1. Factual validation. When someone points out an objective truth, acknowledge it. Example, "You're right, the report was late." Level 2. Emotional validation. When someone expresses frustration, validate their feeling. Example, "You're right, it must have felt unfair when I interrupted you." Level 3.
Situational validation. When someone's perspective comes from their experience or worldview, validate that context. Example, you're right. From where you're standing, that decision does look risky. Each level communicates respect and understanding. Even if you don't agree with every detail, you're showing that their perspective has value. 6. Avoiding the fake "you're right" trap. Authenticity matters. A sarcastic or manipulative "you're right" backfires instantly. Goulston emphasizes tone and timing. The phrase should feel earned, not performed. The best "you're right" comes after you've listened deeply, reflected back what the other person feels, and truly understood their point. Try this simple sequence. Listen without interrupting. Reflect their emotion. You sound frustrated. Confirm their reasoning. You're right, this situation has been stressful. It's not about pretending. It's about acknowledging reality through their eyes. 7. Why "you're right" creates influence. When you validate others, you earn something far more valuable than victory: influence. Influence doesn't come from power, logic, or control. It comes from trust. And trust begins when people feel that you understand them. By saying "you're right," you give them psychological permission to lower their guard. And once that guard is down, they become open to your ideas. This is why great negotiators, therapists, and leaders use validation as a bridge to persuasion. They know that empathy opens ears. 8. The bridge from "you're right" to "here's what I see." Once you've said "you're right" and the emotional tension has dissolved, then, and only then, can you introduce your viewpoint. You can gently transition with phrases like, "You're right about that, and here's another perspective to consider." Or, "You're right that it's been frustrating. Here's what I've noticed." Or, "You're right, this is challenging. Let's see how we can make it better." The "you're right" builds the bridge. Your insight walks across it. This is how difficult conversations become productive ones. 9. Practical ways to use "you're right" in daily life. Here are ways to apply this tool right now. At work, when a colleague criticizes your approach, resist defensiveness. Say, "You're right, I could have communicated that more clearly." At home, when a partner says you don't spend enough time with me, pause and reply, "You're right, I've been distracted lately." In leadership, when employees are anxious about change, say, "You're right, this transition is tough. We're still figuring it out." Every time you use this phrase sincerely, you reduce tension, strengthen connection, and earn respect. 10. The psychological principle behind it. "You're right" satisfies one of the deepest psychological needs in human beings: the need for validation. According to self-determination theory, people are driven by 3 emotional needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. "You're right" feeds the third one, relatedness, by affirming that their viewpoint matters. It turns adversaries into allies because it transforms a zero-sum argument into a shared human moment. 11. When "you're right" doesn't mean agreement. It's important to remember, "you're right" is not about giving up your truth. It's about prioritizing connection before correction. You can still hold your perspective. You're just choosing to understand before being understood. As Goulston writes, "You don't lose power by validating others, you gain influence." People often confuse validation with approval, but they're different. Validation is saying, "I understand." Approval is saying, "I agree." You can do the first without the second. 12. A real-life example: the angry client. Goulston shares the story of a sales executive who faced an irate client yelling about delays and poor communication. Instead of arguing or defending, the executive stayed calm and said, "You're right, we didn't deliver on time, and that must have made you feel ignored. I would have felt the same in your place." The client paused, then sighed and said, "Thank you for understanding." They ended up renewing the contract. That's the power of validation. It cools the heat of anger and creates room for resolution. 13. The "you're right" mindset. Saying "you're right" is not just a phrase, it's a philosophy of humility. It means you value relationships over ego, understanding over argument, and progress over pride. It's about realizing that being right isn't as important as being kind,
and that kindness, paradoxically, makes you more persuasive in the long run. 14. How to train yourself to use it. To make this habit automatic, pause before reacting. When you feel the urge to argue, take a deep breath. Ask yourself what part of what they're saying might be true. Find the truth in their emotion. Even if their facts are wrong, their feelings are real. Acknowledge it. You're right, this has been stressful for you. Practice it in low-stakes situations first, minor disagreements, daily frustrations, until it becomes natural. Soon, you'll find it transforming every relationship you have. 15. The bigger lesson. At its core, Your Right teaches emotional leadership, the ability to lead with empathy instead of ego. It reminds us that connection always precedes correction. When you stop trying to win and start trying to understand, everyone wins. Goulston sums it up beautifully. You don't persuade people by proving them wrong. You persuade them by proving you understand. Reflection for listeners. Next time you're in a disagreement, pause. Take a deep breath, and instead of arguing, say, "You're right." Feel the shift in energy. Watch how walls come down, because sometimes the fastest way to move forward is to stop fighting for your side and start standing by theirs.
Chapter 14. Be more interested than interesting. The secret to deep connection. In Chapter 14 of Just Listen, Mark Goulston introduces one of the most profound yet simple truths about communication. People don't care how interesting you are until they know how interested you are. In a world obsessed with self-promotion, where everyone is trying to be heard, noticed, and admired, Goulston flips the script. The real power, he says, doesn't come from being the most captivating talker, but from being the most curious listener. When you focus on being interested rather than interesting, you unlock an emotional superpower, the ability to make others feel valued, seen, and safe. That's what opens hearts, builds trust, and makes you unforgettable. Number 1. Why interesting doesn't work anymore. Think about conversations you've had where someone tried too hard to impress you, constantly talking about their achievements, their travels, their brilliance. Did you feel connected? Probably not. Goulston calls this the performance trap. Many people think influence means dazzling others with charm or intellect, but the opposite is true. Real connection doesn't come from talking. It comes from listening with intent. When you're focused on being interesting, your attention is on yourself. When you're focused on being interested, your attention is on them. And here's the twist. The more interested you are in others, the more interesting you become in their eyes. Number 2, the neuroscience of being heard. When someone listens to us with genuine interest, the brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. It creates warmth, safety, and trust. But when we feel ignored or dismissed, the brain triggers the amygdala, setting off emotional alarms that make us defensive or withdrawn. That's why being deeply interested in others is not just polite, it's biologically persuasive. It tells the other person's nervous system, you're safe, you matter, you can relax. This relaxation opens the mind, creating a gateway to real communication. Number 4, the 4 levels of interest. Goulston identifies 4 distinct levels of how people listen and engage. Understanding these levels helps us see where we stand and where we can improve. Level 1, pretend interest. You're nodding, smiling, maybe saying, but your mind is elsewhere. You're waiting for your turn to talk. People sense this instantly, and they shut down. Level 2, transactional interest. You're listening, but only for information relevant to your goal. This is common in business, functional, but emotionless. People feel like data points, not human beings. Level 3, curious interest. Here, you're genuinely engaged. You're asking questions, trying to understand. You care about the why behind their words. Level 4, empathic interest. This is the deepest level, where you're not just hearing, you're feeling what the other person feels. You enter their world without judgment or distraction. Goulston calls this the connection zone, the level where transformation happens. Number 4, how to move from interesting
to interested. Goulston shares a set of actionable techniques to help you shift your focus. Letter A. Practice the response. Instead of reacting with your own story, simply say with curiosity. It signals that you're thinking, processing, and intrigued. Letter B. Ask, tell me more about that. These 3 words are pure magic. They open the floodgates of communication. When someone shares something, even a small detail, say, tell me more about that. It shows that you value their experience, and the more they talk, the deeper the bond grows. Number C. Mirror, don't match. Don't rush to relate by saying, that happened to me too. Instead, mirror their emotion, like, that must have been really exciting for you. Mirroring keeps the focus on them. Letter D. Pause before you speak. The moment someone stops talking, resist the urge to fill the silence. A pause communicates that you're digesting what they said, and it often prompts them to go deeper.
5. A story that illustrates the power of interest. Goulston tells the story of a sales professional who struggled to close deals despite being articulate and charismatic. After a coaching session, Goulston challenged him to stop performing and start being present. The next day, during a client meeting, the salesperson said almost nothing. He just asked thoughtful questions like, "What's been the biggest challenge for you this quarter? How has that affected your team?" He barely spoke about his product, and yet the client signed the contract on the spot. When asked why, the client said, "You were the only person who actually seemed to care." That's the power of being interested. 6. The mirror neuron effect. When we're genuinely curious about someone, our brain activates mirror neurons, cells that reflect the emotions and experiences of others. This creates empathy on a neurological level. When people feel mirrored, they feel deeply understood. They sense a shared rhythm. This is why you can sit with someone who truly listens and feel emotionally lighter afterward. Being interested literally changes how another person's brain perceives you. 7. The 3 magic questions. Goulston gives readers a practical framework to cultivate genuine curiosity in conversations, what he calls the 3 magic questions. What's going on? Start broad. Let them share freely. What's been the most challenging part of that? This question unlocks emotion and vulnerability. How can I help? This turns empathy into action. By asking these in sequence, you guide the conversation from surface to depth, and you show that your concern is not just conversational, but human. 8. How interest builds influence. Many people assume that influence means having power or authority. But real influence, Goulston argues, comes from emotional safety. When people feel safe around you, safe to speak, to share, to be real, they naturally become open to your guidance. That's why the world's greatest leaders are also great listeners. They don't dominate conversations, they create space for others to feel heard. The moment someone senses that you're more interested in understanding them than selling yourself, they begin to trust you. And trust is the foundation of every lasting influence. 9. Practical tips to be more interested every day. Here's how to apply Goulston's lessons in daily interactions. Start every conversation with curiosity, not agenda. Before you walk into a meeting, ask yourself, what can I learn from this person today? Look for what's not being said. Pay attention to body language, pauses, and tone. They reveal hidden feelings. Use people's names often. It shows attentiveness and reinforces connection. Resist multitasking. Put your phone away. Nothing kills interest faster than distraction. End conversations with gratitude. Say, "I really enjoyed hearing your perspective." It reinforces their value. These small shifts turn ordinary exchanges into memorable moments. 10. The ripple effect of genuine interest. Goulston describes how interest can create a chain reaction in human behavior. When someone feels listened to, they often pass that feeling on.
They become more patient, more open, and more understanding with others. This ripple effect can transform entire teams, families, and communities. Being interested doesn't just change relationships, it changes environments. 11. The trap of trying to impress. One of the most insightful parts of this chapter is Goulston's warning against approval addiction. Many people talk excessively or boast subtly because they crave validation. But ironically, that behavior pushes others away. The antidote is to focus on giving rather than getting attention. When you make people feel seen, you no longer need to chase being noticed. This mindset shift turns you into someone people are drawn to naturally. 12. A lesson from a Stoic. Goulston references a timeless principle similar to Stoic wisdom. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. This is not weakness, it's mastery. The Stoics knew that control begins with perception. When you control your ego and choose curiosity, you gain influence over situations and emotions alike. The best communicators are the calmest ones in the room, because they listen to understand, not to reply. 13. Becoming a listening leader. In leadership, being interested means asking rather than instructing. It means replacing, "Here's what I think," with, "What do you think?" When team members feel genuinely heard, engagement skyrockets. People take ownership when their voice matters. Great leaders don't demand loyalty, they earn it through empathy. 14. Turning interest into lasting connection. Goulston emphasizes that curiosity should not be temporary. Real relationships require consistent interest over time. Follow up on details people share, their goals, worries, or family updates. When you remember those and bring them up later, it tells them you weren't just listening, you cared enough to remember. That kind of interest deepens bonds beyond any transactional exchange. 15. The final lesson. Listening as a gift. Being interested is not just a communication strategy, it's a form of generosity. When you give someone your full attention, you give them something priceless: validation, dignity, and belonging. In a world full of noise, the person who truly listens becomes magnetic. They don't need to chase influence, it comes to them naturally. Goulston concludes this chapter with a truth that captures the entire spirit of the book. Listening is not about silence, it's about presence.
Chapter 16. Steer clear of toxic people. In this chapter, Mark Goulston delves into one of the most crucial yet often overlooked aspects of effective communication: knowing when to disengage. While much of Just Listen focuses on techniques to connect deeply and empathetically with others, Goulston reminds us that not every person or relationship is worth that emotional investment. Some people are simply toxic, and the best strategy for maintaining your emotional health and communication effectiveness is learning to protect your boundaries. Understanding toxicity. Toxic people are those who consistently drain your emotional energy, manipulate your feelings, and make interactions about themselves. They might play the victim, constantly criticize, or use guilt and shame to control you. Goulston identifies several common types of toxic personalities. The narcissist, always seeking admiration and attention, showing little empathy for others. The victim, constantly blaming others for their problems and refusing to take responsibility. The manipulator, skilled at twisting situations to serve their own interests. The drama addict, always surrounded by chaos and conflict, feeding on emotional upheaval. The criticizer, always pointing out flaws and making others feel inadequate. Recognizing these behaviors early helps you decide when and how to engage, or when to walk away. Goulston explains that trying to fix a toxic person often leads to frustration and burnout, because these individuals thrive on emotional reactions. The emotional cost of toxic relationships. Goulston uses a vivid analogy. Communicating with toxic people is like swimming in a polluted lake. No matter how good a swimmer you are, you'll come out dirty. Toxic individuals can cloud your thinking, damage your confidence, and drain your motivation. Over time, these interactions can make you reactive, defensive, and emotionally fatigued. He stresses that your mental clarity and peace of mind are your greatest assets in communication. Losing them means losing your ability to connect authentically with others who truly matter. The first step, therefore, is to prioritize emotional hygiene, just like you would physical health. Lessons from real-life encounters. Goulston shares stories from his psychiatric practice where clients tried to change or please people who were never willing to reciprocate respect. One such story involves a successful businesswoman who spent years trying to appease a critical boss. Despite her efforts, the boss remained belittling and dismissive. Once she recognized the pattern, she stopped seeking his validation, emotionally detached, and eventually found a healthier work environment. The transformation wasn't just external, it was internal. By setting boundaries, she regained her sense of control and confidence. Goulston highlights this as a key takeaway. You can't communicate effectively from a place of emotional exhaustion. How to recognize when to step back. To determine whether someone is toxic, Goulston offers 3 questions. Do I feel drained or uplifted after interacting with this person? Do I feel like I can be myself around them? And do they respect my boundaries and emotions? If the answer to any of these is no, it's time to reassess your level of engagement. In communication, reciprocity matters. When one side constantly gives and the other only takes, connection becomes manipulation. The power of detachment. Detachment doesn't mean hostility or indifference. It means protecting your peace. Goulston recommends the empathic disengagement approach. Instead of reacting emotionally, you acknowledge the person's feelings but refuse to absorb them. For instance, I understand that you're upset. Let's talk when things have calmed down. Or, I hear what you're saying, but I need some time to think about it. This way, you maintain your dignity while not feeding into the emotional chaos. Over time, toxic people either adjust their behavior or drift away when they realize they can't control your emotions anymore. Dealing with toxicity in close relationships. The most difficult situations arise when toxic people are family members, partners, or long-term colleagues. Goulston offers a compassionate but firm strategy. Set limits without guilt. You can say things like, I care about you, but I can't continue this conversation if it becomes hurtful. Or, I want to help, but I can't do that if I feel attacked. Such responses shift the power dynamic. You're no longer reacting, but responding from a place of strength.
Reclaiming emotional power. A key message in this chapter is that your emotional state is your responsibility. Toxic people gain power only when you let them dictate how you feel. Goulston encourages readers to build emotional resilience through practices such as mindfulness, becoming aware of emotional triggers and learning to pause before reacting, journaling, writing about difficult interactions to gain clarity, support networks, surrounding yourself with empathetic, positive individuals who recharge you. These habits help you stay grounded and maintain your composure even in challenging situations. A powerful analogy. The oxygen mask rule. Goulston compares emotional boundaries to the oxygen mask rule on airplanes. Put yours on first before helping others. You can't be an effective communicator, leader, or friend if you're constantly suffocating in toxic energy. Protecting your emotional health isn't selfish. It's strategic self-preservation that enables you to engage meaningfully with the right people. Practical applications. Limit exposure. Reduce unnecessary contact with toxic people. Avoid engaging in gossip, arguments, or emotional debates. Redirect conversations. When someone tries to manipulate or provoke you, change the topic or calmly exit the conversation. Set clear consequences. For instance, if you continue to shout,
I'll have to end this discussion. Then follow through. Build positive circles. Replace draining relationships with uplifting ones, people who challenge you constructively, not destructively. Self-affirmation. Regularly remind yourself of your worth and values. Toxic people often make you doubt both. Final takeaway. In the end, Goulston's message is profound. Not every connection is worth saving. The true art of communication isn't just about reaching everyone. It's about knowing who deserves your energy. By steering clear of toxic people, you preserve your ability to listen deeply, connect authentically, and influence positively. Your communication skills are only as powerful as your emotional stability. Guard it wisely. Practical tip for everyday life. At the end of each week, reflect on your interactions. Identify the people who uplifted you and those who drained you. For the latter, set boundaries or reduce engagement the following week. Over time, you'll notice your communication becoming clearer, your empathy deeper, and your peace more consistent.
As we reach the end of Just Listen, let's take a moment to reflect on the quiet, transformative power that lives inside every conversation. Mark Goulston's message is simple, yet profoundly human. The greatest gift you can give someone is to make them feel heard, seen, and understood. In a world where everyone is fighting to be noticed, the real leaders, changemakers, and healers are the ones who listen first. They listen to understand, not to respond. They listen not to argue, but to connect. From calming angry people with empathy, to unlocking trust through the magic of tell me more, to mastering tools like and huh. Goulston has shown that influence begins not with words, but with presence. Listening is not weakness, it's strategy. It's emotional intelligence in motion. It's the bridge between misunderstanding and collaboration, between resistance and agreement, between chaos and peace. So, as you close this audiobook, ask yourself, when was the last time you made someone feel truly heard? When did you last pause, breathe, and just listen? Start practicing it today, with your family, your colleagues, your clients, even strangers. You'll find the doors start to open, tempers start to cool, and people begin to lean in, not because you talked better, but because you understood deeper. That's the essence of Goulston's philosophy. If you can reach people's hearts, their minds will follow. This has been an audiobook-style summary of Just Listen, Discover the Secret to Getting Through to Absolutely Anyone by Mark Goulston, presented by Audio Growth Library. If this book inspired you, make sure to check out more life-changing summaries on our channel, where we transform powerful ideas into practical wisdom for your daily life. Remember, the next time you're about to speak, take a deep breath and just listen.